This week, what we're going to look at is a time period where there's a significant change in Colorado. We moved from a place in which many people had moved into Colorado for different reasons. We had people who were explorers, trappers, traders. We had the Spaniards moving into the south as well as the Mexican population. Many of them were coming in for different reasons, but for the most part, what we saw was that most people were getting along. They were figuring out how to work together, and most of the population were blending quite well. However, in 1858, a lot of this changes in Colorado. Gold is discovered in 1858. So under 1858A, you're going to write gold was discovered along the South Platte. When gold was discovered along the South Platte, it drew a whole lot of people to the state of Colorado. In 1859, you can write down these numbers, tens of thousands of Americans come into Colorado. Many of the people coming into Colorado were people who were very familiar with gold rushes. They were people like William Green Russell. He was a gentleman who participated in the gold rush in Georgia, and then later on he went to California to participate in the 1849 gold rush. These people were very familiar with how gold was handled, how it was panned. What they were not ready for, though, was what was offered here in Colorado, and we'll talk about that down here in C in the boom and bust cycle of the gold rush. So these people who were coming to Colorado were unique in that 90% of the people who came during the gold rush came here as people who were born in the United States. So that's what you're going to write in 1. 90% born in the United States. These people were coming to Colorado in part because there was not a lot of opportunity for them in the East. We had people who were there, but they couldn't buy any land no matter how hard they worked. And we had people who maybe had gained some wealth in the East, but they didn't see any opportunity by way of maybe moving up in society. So they were coming to be people to kind of head up different towns and build different towns. What happened, though, is when a lot of these people came, what they discovered was that gold mining was going to be very, very different in Colorado. Whereas in places like California, what they would do is they would pan for gold. If you can imagine kind of a picture in your head of somebody going to a stream and sifting through the stream looking for gold, that's not what we have here in Colorado. Our gold and silver and our minerals are deposited within rock. And so when you think of gold, it's very, very hard to extract. You see little veins of it within rock. And what is required in order to extract that is a process called smeltering. Well, smeltering had not been developed yet, and so when they realized that the only way that they were going to get gold was to have to break apart rocks, that prospect was not very enticing for a lot of people. They didn't think that it was going to be able to happen quick enough for them, and many, many people, basically within the span of a year, decided to move back to wherever they were from. So C, you see the boom and bust cycle. Within the span of about a year, like I said, about 10,000 people moved back home. But some people stayed. Those hardy people developed towns. They decided that this was the place for them. And in 1861, Colorado becomes a territory. Because Colorado is so small at this point in time, we have a lot of people moving in who really are seeking their fortunes. So when I list politicians here, unfortunately, what we got early on in terms of politicians were people who were really seeking to be gold miners, wanting to get their wealth. They were not necessarily people who were the best of politicians. That's also what you see in terms of businessmen too. Businessmen are coming here wanting to make a buck. So we have early people wanting to come set up towns, wanting to set up businesses, to sell goods to different people who are coming in to mine gold. So with a lot of this change, as you can imagine, tens of thousands of people coming in, there's going to be some conflict. We talked about last week a little bit Bent's Old Fort, and Bent's Old Fort is really I would say a model for how early settlers and Native Americans, along with other populations in early Colorado, got along. They used the ideas of each other, they helped each other. Well, this didn't happen with the gold rush, unfortunately. A lot of people were coming in with a very single-minded idea of getting rich very quick, and what happened were events like we see in 1864. People coming in didn't want the help of Native Americans. They didn't need people to guide them to find the gold. All they were seeking were riches. And so this week in our discussion, we are talking about Sand Creek. But I think it's very, very helpful to understand in a timeline where Sand Creek fits in. Because as you can see, it's really only 6 years before Sand Creek happens that we have a lot of people start to come into Colorado. People with very different ideas. And if you can imagine, as a Native American in Colorado, these people flooding into your territory, basically using a lot of the natural resources and not having any idea that that's what you basically live on, you can imagine that there's going to be some sort of conflict. And that's exactly what happens, as we see in the 1864 Sand Creek incident. And I'm not going to talk too much about it here, but that's what our discussion is about this week. You can see then, after Sand Creek, in the timeline here, I want you to fill in 1865, the Native Americans respond to the Americans. And what happens here is that Native Americans attack the Americans. And they attack them at a place called Julesburg, and that's in eastern Colorado. It's a place where the Overland Trail splits, and it forks so that you can either go up to Oregon and California, or you could go down to Denver. So this is a very central location for people coming into Colorado, and the Native Americans after Sand Creek basically respond to what happened at Sand Creek by the Sioux, the Arapaho, and the Cheyenne people allying all of their troops, about 1,000 of them, and coming down to Julesburg, to this place that's really a trading post and a communication center for the Overland Trail. What they do is they respond to what happened at Sand Creek, and they destroy a lot of the communication lines. They destroy as well hay. They attack civilians. They attack soldiers. And what we have now, in part because of Sand Creek, is an all-out war between Native Americans and Americans trying to defend their territory. So Americans are, of course, trying to protect the settlers who are coming in, while the Native Americans are trying to defend their life. But it is a huge, huge change for both parties. And I think that the timeline really helps you see why and how that happens. The next two dates that you see are under G, and that's 1865 and 67. We have the Treaty of Medicine Lodge. And the Treaty of Medicine Lodge is basically the federal government's way to pacify the Indians, as well as tell them, we are going to put you on reservations so that you don't get in our way anymore. So what the Treaty of Medicine Lodge does is it removes the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. It removes them to Oklahoma and then up into Montana and Wyoming. So presently there are 2 reservations up in Montana and Wyoming that the Cheyenne and Arapaho people are at. Then they are also down in Oklahoma and have reservations there. So the way the federal government basically solved the Indian problem during that time was to put Indians off on different reservations in different states. So that solved the conflict for a little while. However, many Native Americans did not want to go to the reservation initially. And so in 1868, we see another battle that the Native Americans rise up one last time, and it's the battle at Beecher Island. What they do at the Battle of Beecher Island is that they attack troops and surround the island, holding them hostage for a period of about a week. And so this goes on for a significant period of time. We can see many battles throughout the Midwest as a result of the federal government's desire to try to pacify the Native Americans during this time. As you can see, within about the span of 10 years, the relationship between Native Americans and Americans changes drastically. And I will leave it to you to speculate why that happens, but I think the timeline helps you understand to a certain degree some of the motivators that lead not only Americans but also the federal government to make the decisions that they did. And you can also see that Native Americans didn't sit by passively and let it happen, but they did respond in a way that showed they weren't happy with the federal government's response. So once again, carrying from early Colorado history, we're up until about 1868, and we can see that relationships are already changing in Colorado because of the events that transpire within history.